Welcome to another episode of Customer Success Talks, real challenges, experts advice. Today we have an amazing guest with us, but before we continue, let me introduce myself. Remember, I'm Byron Toruño, host and the one guiding today's episode as well. I'm here just like you. I'm learning. I'm passionate about customer success. I'm a customer success nerd. And today we have an amazing guest who's going to teach us a lot about adoption, a lot about not only what that means. We're going to go through strategies. We will also talk about metrics. We will talk a little bit about everything here. But who am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about Dillon Young. He is the founder. He's also a leader. He's a visionary as well. What else can we say about Dillon? Businessman, you name it. Dillon is the host of the Lifetime Value podcast, which you're gonna see in the About section, and we're gonna learn a little bit more about lifetime value. It's more than a podcast as well. Dillon is leader in customer success, and also is helping a lot of people to build their own brand. And in the daily stand-up show, his co-hosts were Rob Sambito and JP Frost, who have been here in the podcast as well, and you know them. I invite you to follow them. So, Dillon, thank you very much for being here with us. Thank you so much for your time, and yeah, let's start this.
Hey, Byron. Good to be here. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you. But Dillon, let's see. Let's talk about lifetime value. What are people going to expect from that?
So Lifetime Value is a media company aimed at customer success and post-sales. You could call it go-to-market, whatever we're calling it these days. It's aimed at those folks. It's a profession that's not going away. And I'm putting a bet on it that those folks are going to need more and more information about their profession in a refreshing but educational, not too serious, but also non-biased format. And so we're building Lifetime Value to hopefully serve at least a portion of that market.
Interesting. So you're not being serious then?
If you've listened to any of my shows, you'll know that I don't take myself too seriously. I can go on tirades, but at the end of the day, I'll use a meme or I'll swear a little bit and talk about how much I hate Taylor Swift.
Oh my God. I'm going to edit this part then.
Everybody says that. Nobody does.
Dillon, what is it for you? What is for you adoption? What is the meaning of adoption?
It's a funny one because I remember getting into this profession, everybody talked about, it was this foregone conclusion that adoption is, I don't mean this literally, but sort of logins. How many times did they log in? And when you'd go to your boss, you're a CSM, you're like, hey, I think we really ought to be measuring adoption better. They would say, well, we can see how many times they log in. We can see when they last logged in. We can see if they're logged in now. And what I have since learned is that adoption is this very crazy, enigmatic term that we use. And I actually, if I'm being hot takey, I don't even know if it's the right term. But what I think we're getting at is we want our users to achieve their desired results using our software. And we expect that means that they're using a certain amount of the software, if it's a number of features, or they're logged in for an amount of time. But truly what we want to see is whether they're achieving their outcomes in an efficient manner and all within our software, using all of the tools that our software can provide to do that thing. They're not going out elsewhere. They're not using workarounds. They're not using the spreadsheet. That's what we mean when we say adoption, I think.
Love it. I definitely agree. And it's interesting how things have changed, right? From years ago nowadays. And I will say I'm kind of the new ones going into what have people built before and now where we are also adding new stuff to it. So definitely agree that before it was login, but yeah, now it's expanding in a crazy way. that I want to ask you, what strategy would you say helps to guide the customer to use more than just the ABC of your product?
Well, it starts there, right? I think if it is customer number one, it starts with just saying like, hey, try this out and see if it works.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, see if this is a better use of your time, or you can get this task done faster than you would otherwise. But hopefully that isn't the case for very long, because in my experience, and I've mostly worked for companies that are 200 employees or less, like pretty small companies. I know you know that life. So you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, yeah.
But it is what I have found to be incredibly effective at that level is benchmarking. The
Mm,
ability to go to a customer and say, hey, this other customer that walks and talks like you're a bank, they're a bank, you guys are in the same region, or you sell the same products, or your assets under management are similar, whatever that might be. Banks just happen to be what I've worked with. These folks use this tool and they achieve X, Y, or Z more than you do. You guys have the same desired outcomes and they're doing it, this much more efficiently, or just straight up better. Like they've got more widgets in the pipe than you do. I find that benchmarking helps in two ways. First of all, it's a little bit of social proofing. Everybody wants to see that. But it also, if you're talking to the right person, it generates a bit of competitiveness in them. Oh, that's my
mm.
competitor. I want to be doing what they're doing. I can't be left behind. They can't be innovating more than me. And so I have always found that benchmarking done correctly is the most effective tool I've ever seen.
But when you say done correctly, can you give an example
Yeah.
of and
Yep.
a scenario of that?
And I said that so you would ask this question. Primarily, it is that you can't give away the farm when you talk about a customer, right?
Right.
Typically, we're not allowed to use their names, their logos, because it is in some way either sharing some secret sauce that they want to have from your product, or there's proprietary information, particularly in the industries that I worked in, which was fintech. Ton of what is called personal private information or private personal information. I think it's called PPI. So you've got to be very, very careful about the information that you share. And so you get a little bit one arm tied behind your back where you're trying to explain, like, hey, this customer that is also a depository, that's also in the Midwest, and that targets these same sorts of
I see
customers.
what you're doing. Yeah.
Here's how what their numbers look like. You've got to be a little bit obtuse in the way that you uh, explain things to the audience that you're talking to at that time. And so that's what I mean by done right. I think otherwise, I've tried to share benchmark numbers with a similar to what I just explained, maybe a small bank in the Midwest. They're serving 3 or 4 states, and compare them to the largest credit union in America, which has like $52 billion under in their depositories or something like that. Um, and if your customer you're trying to speak to finds that out, first of all, they think you don't understand their business.
Right.
And secondly, they just throw that information out the window. They're like, well, I can't compete with that. That's not my peer. That we're not even in the same category. And so it is a little bit of protecting your other customers from the customer you're speaking to. And it's also a lot of making sure you understand your customer. It's
Understand.
the business acumen that I talk a lot about, of understanding how they make money, who is their target market, and understanding, make sure you're comparing apples to apples, essentially.
Yeah. There cannot be a worse way of doing that than not understanding your customers. Like if you don't understand your customers, you're gonna grab an apple and show how it can work with I don't know. I'm bad at examples.
An orange. Yeah, that's the
Yeah, for
classic one.
example, there
Apples
you
and
go.
oranges.
There's like no way that you can do that without understanding your customers as well. But would this change if we're talking about enterprise companies, like segmenting the customer from white gloves to mid-market to small business? I mean, the approach probably might change.
You mean sharing the same information in in the benchmarking practice, or is it just that you might not even share benchmark information with a different segment, like call them your tech touch folks.
Basically, yeah, exactly.
So I would disagree. I actually think, and maybe I led you down that path. So I don't know if that's actually what you meant, but I would disagree that actually benchmarking is even more valuable for those tech touch folks because that is a powerful piece of data that
Right.
you can serve up without even having to be there to explain it to those customers.
Hmm.
Right? This ability to say, hey, these people, they spend the same amount of money per month as you, or they're in the same industry. Think of like a Monday.com, right? Like they have millions of users in their system and they can say, like, oh, you're also a media company. Oh, these guys, I have these 10 guys over here who also have 1 through 10 employees and they're in the tri-state area and they have found that they clear their projects 10 times faster if they use this add-on that costs additional money. Right.
So this.
So
Mhm.
go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, no, go for it. Go for it.
I think the further up the chain you go, it becomes more difficult because your enterprise folks, um, high touch, if you want to call them that, whatever we're calling these segments these days.
I
Uh,
heard white gloves too.
white glove, sure, yeah, yeah. We have, yeah. Well, I just think they're going to be a lot more discerning, and you're putting yourself on a call with them typically to show them these benchmark numbers, and so they're going to ask a ton of questions. Versus, I actually think that your tech touch folks or your long tail or your um, unassigned customer accounts may not ask the same level of questions. They may just trust that the information is appropriate.
Yeah. And Dylan, I have so many questions.
Me
How
too.
do we set our how do we set up ourselves for success? If we're playing chess, once you start your first move, you're already thinking about the last move to win.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
adoption is also a lot of strategic thinking and being futurist of where are we gonna be in 6 months or 8 months before the renewal come? What are we gonna do now? So
Hmm.
what advice would you give to everyone to set up themselves for success when it comes to the adoption?
This is really a key play in customer success, regardless of what it is you're trying to accomplish. Adoption is it's a cornerstone of what we do, whether it's called that or not. I'm still not sure. And that is making sure you understand early
Mm-hmm.
what it is your customer is trying to achieve. That's not always the same. And how you drive adoption with them is going to 100% depend on what those desired outcomes are for the customer. I've worked at a company where they sold it was the front end of taking mortgage applications for homes.
Okay.
And so it was just it took information. It was basically like a glorified form, but it also took a ton of like documents, and so it had to be secure, blah blah blah. But our big selling point was we're really good at getting customers through your funnel. So
Mm.
customers don't drop out if we get them into the form. It was like I don't know, like a 70 or 80% conversion rate. If we got their email, if we could send them the information, they were very likely to finish the form because the form was so easy to fill out. We walked them through it. It was the TurboTax of, whatever. But what you'll notice in there is there's nothing about more applications.
Hmm.
We had no power to get you more applications. We just made sure that the applications you brought through were more efficient, more of them converted. And so if anybody ever came to us and they said, well, I just want more business, well, it'd be really easy for us to get confused and say, yeah, we can get that for you. You'll get more business on the back end. But what we're really saying is we'll just convert the lead you already have better. And
Mm.
so if the buyer is not clear on that, if you guys aren't speaking the same language and then constantly updating one another throughout the process, hey, is this Mr. Customer, is this still what you care about? Look at this number now. Are you happy with that? Are you happy now? Are you happy now? If you're not constantly having that conversation, first of all, your customer's probably going to forget, right? They're going to see the bill at the end of the year and they're going to be like, well, I don't know if it's that valuable.
Oh.
But you're going to forget too. And you're going to go into the conversation 6 months later and you're going to say the wrong thing. You're going to say, hey, you guys are converting great. And he's going to be like, yeah, but my applications are actually down. So, like, I don't think you guys are really doing your job. Okay, well, that's not really what we're here to do. We're just here to make sure that the folks who do land on your page convert more often. So the mortgage industry has gone through this insane crisis. Yeah, we can't help that, but we will make sure that the folks who do come through convert more often. And you can see how that it's a nuanced conversation that you can only achieve if you set a foundation early and then you are constantly communicating and realigning with your customers. And not only your decision makers, but also your users, because what they find valuable about the software is almost guaranteed to not be the same thing as the decision maker. They don't care about the dollars and cents. They
Hmm.
care about how it impacts their daily operations. Does it make it harder? Does it make it easier?
Because it transforms in numbers sometimes as well.
Yeah.
And Dylan, when it comes to when you say realigning to users, how important is it this to realign with your own colleagues as well? This is a team where you keep the momentum
Yeah.
from sales, keep the momentum from onboarding, and then going on to
Hmm.
adoption. But how can you realign internally as well? So, for example, how do we come up with a strategy that we're going to help the customer adopt better, including other departments, product, including sales, including marketing? Is it the message being sent correctly? Are we bringing the right customer? Are we actually implementing features in a way that we're hearing the customer?
It's a really good question. This is it's like a really tangled up ball uh of who's responsible for what. I think
Yeah.
the way I would think about it is product kind of leads the pack.
Okay.
The expectation needs to be and should be the product is making informed decisions about where to take the product based on a lot of different things. One of those is existing customers.
Mm-hmm.
Another of those is maybe closed lost customers. Okay. So that first one was customer success. That second one is sales. And then the third one is just like straight up research of like what the market wants. That maybe we're not getting that signal through closed lost deals. Like, because we're not even finding those people because our product doesn't even touch on, it's not even close to providing that thing. But that market research is probably the third pillar that I think product needs to be working on. And so I think it all starts with product, but often customer success then sort of takes control at a certain point because it is only through they get to give feedback in two different ways. Hey, this existing customer really loves the product, but he wishes it also did this, or she also wishes it did this.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, by the way, hey, sales, you sold this customer. They're having a tough time because I think their expectation was something different when you sold it. So customer success gets to provide information in two different ways. Whereas sales, for the most part, is probably going to say, we lost this deal because the customer or the prospect said, we don't do this one thing as good as our competitor, or we just don't even have this thing that our competitor has along with everything else that they need. So sales has just that close loss signal to provide. And so believe that alignment starts with product. And I believe a product should lead that conversation and should be constantly asking customer success and sales
To give
to
me more.
deliver
Mm-hmm.
that information. They should be working with your sales op person. Get me a field in Salesforce that says why this deal failed to close. They should be asking customer success, hey, on every QBR you go on, either let me join and ask questions about the product of the customer, or can you please make sure that you ask these questions every single time and fill them out in this Google form later on. Product should be asking for that information, and in a sophisticated organization, I believe they are. But often customer success ends up leading that conversation, particularly early on when product is, chasing their tail. They don't have enough time to build those sort of like secondary or tertiary processes. And sales, they just if the deal doesn't go through, they just move on. they're
Basically.
not they're not worried
That's
about trying to optimize the feedback loop.
yeah.
Nothing against them. I just don't think they care.
And that's reality, I will say. But interesting, because normally I have seen as well customer success taking those leads. Um, but we talk a lot with the one, two, three, or four stakeholders of the company. And of course,
Hmm.
they are the decision makers. And of course, they are the ones who will give us their internal voice into what is going on. And they're
Yep.
giving us the red flags into, yeah, we're going to renew or not. We are understanding the product. But at the end, there's a lot of users behind the product that we're not talking to. And that's the important part of the product. The product
Hmm.
itself is reaching to those customers that we in customer success might not ever see.
Yeah, it's tough because the phrase "the squeaky wheel gets the grease" is that the way it goes? Yeah, squeaky wheel gets the
I'm
grease,
the worst for that.
or something like that. Um,
Let us know,
and
people.
the idea is just, the people that complain, they get the most attention. And
Right.
so
They're
we
the most loud.
assume that if a user isn't sending in tickets, or doesn't have a CSM, or isn't talking to their CSM, or they're too far down the line, like we just never even get to them, uh, we assume that they're happy. And that's where I do believe that there is a shortage of, and there ought to, and I would encourage everybody to design their products or think about their products in a way that they can see usage such that they can identify those folks that are struggling silently. And, we just had a conversation about this on the daily stand up, but basically, I believe that B2C companies have this figured out by way of
Mm.
necessity, because they have hundreds of thousands, millions of customers. And so if their telemetry is not rock solid, if they are not constantly teasing through those data points to understand, like, oh, Dillon, I do this all the time where I'll sign up for a service and it doesn't seem to be what I need. And so I just abandon that service altogether. It was a free trial, whatever. I'll cancel it. And they try really hard. Like you'll see a lot of these B2C services send you an email and they're like, "Hey, are you going to come back? It looks like you were having trouble, blah blah blah." And so that they know that you're not using the software. I think we could learn a lot from those B2C companies about how we track and monitor user behavior.
I agree. I agree. But when it comes to measure, what are the key metrics that you will say, oh, they're adopt. They're adopt and I'm a gold shiny customer success manager.
I honestly think it's less about the CSM than it is about a well-designed product. But
Mm.
I'm going to give you everybody's favorite answer. Can you guess what it is?
Everybody's favorite answer.
Yeah,
It depends.
it depends. It depends because it totally depends what your product does.
Mhm.
If your big thing is your product, think about like TurboTax. Let's bring them back up. Never worked for them, but so this is not an advertisement. But think about if TurboTax measured success of its users by how often they log in, there would be alarm bells going off constantly at TurboTax.
Definitely.
If their unit of measurement was how many buttons you click, alarm bells would be going off all year round. Because TurboTax's whole thing was, how do we make it as simple as possible for you to file your taxes? We'll walk you through the whole dang process. And so that is different than something like Facebook or
Mm.
Instagram, which thrives off of linger time, time on screen, time logged in. Like they're just, I think we've all got to take a step back and recognize, what are we trying to accomplish? And it's very clear that Facebook just wants you to be on the app
As
24
much as
hours a day.
possible. Yeah.
TurboTax wants you to be on the app as little as possible. And so you've got to take that step back and understand, okay, well, what does that mean? I got to a really good place with my last product partner when
Mhm.
I said, how do you get bonused? What is it about your product that you're being measured on, because it's probably what the company cares about and what we think makes a good user. Now that's not 100% the case. I mean, if it was just how many sprints I ram out the door, well, then there's a bigger issue at play here. But typically, what you're going to find is that what product is being measured on is what they believe your ideal customer profile looks like. You
Yeah.
might have more than one because your decision maker is probably not logging in, but your user versus your user manager versus your admin, you probably have 3 different user profiles right there. You can start to understand, like, well, you want your admin to be spending more time in the admin panel. And is their permissions structure nice and elegant? Do they not have a ton of issues with that? Do you see that they're not having to reset passwords a ton? Like, those are probably good things for an admin. You hear a lot of talk also about how 0 tickets is not necessarily a healthy customer. Rather, it's a customer who sends in a ticket every once in a while. They get their problem solved pretty quickly, and the sentiment within their language seems pretty positive.
Yeah. And what questions they're asking.
Yeah. And so, like, that's another one where, like, wouldn't it be great if you got on a QBR every single quarter and you just showed them a flat line and you said, hey, you guys don't have any tickets. Things are great. Don't you think that decision maker is going to be like, wait, what's the problem? So you're saying my guys aren't engaged at all, right? Like, I think we just have to elevate our thinking around what it is we actually care about, what makes a healthy give and take between customer and vendor or user and platform, and then start answering questions that are specific to our situation and our space and time. And that's why it depends, and not specifically logins or they click the orange button 25 times this month.
And they're ready. Yeah. A
Yeah.
lot of understanding. A lot of understanding. And are you a fan of surveys? Are you a fan of NPS and CSAT? Because I
Are you
heard
asking that because
I heard 1550 here. A lot of people say, no, that doesn't mean nothing. Other ones, yeah, that means a lot. And I want to hear your take on this one.
I'll tell you this. NPS doesn't mean what everybody thinks it means. Not
Okay.
only does it not mean what everybody thinks it means because it's not a sentiment score.
Mm-hmm.
It's not CSAT. It's not how happy were you with this interaction sort of stuff like you get with a ticket or when you leave the bathroom in the airport. Like, those aren't what NPS measures. NPS measures loyalty to a product. And I believe, though don't quote me on this, it was originally designed for B2C products. I
Right.
do
Mm-hmm.
not believe it was designed for B2B, because what happens in B2B is, look, your people can love you all day, but if you jack up your prices by 50%,
No.
who cares if your NPS is a 10? Who cares if they're a promoter? Like, you can't survive that. And so NPS, I love the work of Greg Danes over at ChurnRx. He has done a ton of research, and I don't know the data behind it. I'll assume it's rock solid, that says it does not change anything about your retention figures if somebody is a promoter versus a detractor, which
Mm-hmm.
are the positives and the negatives of NPS, and passive too. Like, it doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is if they respond at all. If they do not respond, then their churn half-life is like way less, meaning they churn much sooner. It's like 18 months versus 3 years or something like that. So from that point, or from that perspective, NPS is super valuable because it shows you that, and that's ultimately what we're after. I think NPS also plays a part because every board wants to see it, even if they don't. I don't know if they know these same details. Maybe they only care to see how many people are responding. What's the response rate? What's the response ratio?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe. But the other thing I'll call out about NPS and any other survey is the way in which you ask it, and the way the details matter. So if you are asking somebody to give you a 1 out of 10 and you're asking them in the exact same verbiage that you have to for NPS, but you ask 1 year, you ask in January, let's say January 1 to January 14th. And the next year you ask from February 1 to February 14th. Where do you think you'll get the better results?
In the second one?
Probably. I'm
Mhm.
just guessing because everybody's coming back from holiday vacation, a super long holiday vacation. They're swamped with emails. They got a bunch of stuff. They're getting ready for the new year. Do they want to even answer your survey?
And it's
And the
about
problem is you can't ask them to answer the survey because now you're putting your thumb on the scale. And if the real thing we care about is response rate, well, if you have to, if you show up at their door and say, hey, please answer this NPS survey, then it starts to look like they're going to retain, like they're going to
right,
stick around longer. But because you had to beg them to do it, which so many people do, then that data is obsolete. In fact, it's tainted, right? Like it's screwing up your ratios and so for all those reasons, I really don't like surveys. I think data, usage data, if we are measuring the proper adoption metrics of which we cannot speak about because we don't like we're not talking about a real product or
yeah.
company right now. That's the stuff that really tells the story. It's not you calling somebody up or sending them an email and say, "Do you like me?"
Did you?
You know?
Ah, I have seen this go so wrong. If, for example, I used to work for a company that had different softwares in the package. Then
Yeah.
that means that there were different teams in charge of each package or each piece of feature. And it would like if we were not all aligned, customers were receiving so many emails from
Yeah.
welcome on board, from are you happy from the service we just gave you? Are you happy from the last 6 months? But not only one NPS, several NPS, and then people were getting just bumped it with all of those surveys. So it's a lot about alignment as well, I would say.
Yeah, I think what's funny is if you were asking this of somebody else, it's very easy for somebody to say, like, yeah, well, that's why a CSM should own every product. Like they
Mm,
shouldn't be product specific. But that doesn't like, do they also handle all post sales motions? Like a salesperson doesn't get involved? Because you get to a point where then a CSM can work with 5 customers.
right.
Like, and I've been in that place where I've owned every product. My customers had 5 to like 10 SKUs a piece. And they were huge contracts, really important customers. But if, we had Julie Fox on recently and she said something so profound. She said, if you're a good CSM, I want you to touch as many customers as possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that my first example would fly in the face of that. If I'm a really good CSM, but if I handle all the products, God forbid, I also handle the tickets, I handle all of the additional like sales motions after the fact,
Mhm.
then I can only touch a very small subset of the customers. And so, like, far be it for us to say how to design it. There's another piece that says, like, okay, well, you could be a customer success manager that only touches one piece on a customer that has 5 or 10 different products purchased. They're a big power user of your company, but then that means you have to have a CSP in place.
Mm,
Okay, well, what if you don't have the money for that? I mean, there's a lot of companies out there that are saying they don't have a lot of money for stuff. What I have seen work previously, in lieu of all of that, is you've got to find a way to communicate with the group of folks who might need to interact with your customers. So the way we did that, previous companies, was we just created Slack channels that were
mm,
locked. And
okay.
only the people that needed to be a part of that customer's conversation were invited to that channel. It wasn't to be gatekeepy, it was to just try to reduce the noise. So you didn't join that channel unless you needed to. And so some people were in all of them, like CEO and CTO, stuff like that, VP of sales. But for the most part, it was your CSM, maybe the support folks, or you would invite them in if you needed them for a specific issue. Your product marketing folks. Like there's a couple of people that were going to be in most of them. And that was just a running log. You kept your
Yeah.
call notes in there along with in Salesforce or your CSP. And the point I'm trying to make is you've got to find a way to create channels of communication. I think we sometimes try to over engineer this and we say like, oh,
Yeah.
you need to have all this, or you should only be segmented like this, and you should be in a pod, or you should do that. And like, great, they're all great ideas for a company in a vacuum. And so what's better is to think about, how do we at this company communicate more seamlessly? And then how do we motivate everybody at the company to follow that process? Because at the end of the day, that's all that matters. I mean, if you have a CSP, it doesn't matter if Byron's not going to fill out the information in it. If he's this rebel that's, just, oh, I don't need to, or, I've been the CSM who has in the past thought, I'm not going to put any information in there so that I'm indispensable. So they can't fire me because I have all the information in my head. Spoiler alert, they will still fire you. But anyway,
Always.
seamless communication, that's the key, not any one system or process. It's going to totally depend.
It's amazing, Dylan. It's amazing all of the information that you're giving here and all the tactical strategies as well and all the experiences. I really, really appreciate all of this that you're sharing with the world. I really appreciate all of this just real life scenarios that you're given when it comes to adoption. That is a beast as well as it is adoption, as it is the advocacy side. Each pillar of the customer journey, there's just a lot, and you will not do it alone. But
Yeah.
beside all of the amazing tips that you gave here, you said something like I really want to highlight, which is don't over engineer stuff.
Yeah.
Sometimes we want to complicate things too much because
Uh-huh.
we get too excited, but then sometimes a lot of structure is not needed, or sometimes it's needed because it all depends, right? And
Mm-hmm.
in the about section, there's going to be the link to the It All Depends podcast from a
Mm.
good friend. But don't over engineer, start basic, understand, ask the questions, create allies in your company, understand your customers, and then just start adding from there. That's amazing, Dylan. Thank you so much for your time. Any last words that you have
Good luck out there, guys. It's crazy. It's
on your
crazy. It's a hard
surveys?
job, but it is uniquely fulfilling, as I have seen. And if anybody ever wants to talk about it, you can find me or find the various podcasts that we do. We'd love to talk and share information.
Absolutely. It's all about sharing. It's all about sharing. Thank you so much, Dylan. Everyone, remember, in the about section, there's going to be a lot of information. You're going to see the CS Connect community as well. We are also expanding to Latin America. So there are some episodes there. We are moving on to Latin America. We want to highlight all of the talent over there and all of the challenges
Great.
that everyone is going through. If you don't speak Spanish, but you do want to learn, definitely go and listen to the podcast. Thank you, Dylan. Again, thank you everyone for your time. And remember, let's keep growing, keep learning, and let's keep improving the world of customer success. Until next time.